What's up everyone, this is Don with Third Creative, and this is the walkthrough tutorial video for Squad Multi-Sport Photoshop template. And in this video I'm going to walk you through all of the layers, cover all of the processes, and hopefully cover anything and everything that you might need to know in order to create the best images possible with this design. I'm going to start off with the 2x3 vertical. A lot of what we cover here will apply to the other files as well, but we'll wrap things up covering a few of the differences with the horizontal files and the memory mate. But let's jump right into this. I always like to start at the bottom and work my way up. So at the very bottom we have our background layers folder, and if we turn that off you can see what we lose, what's contained in this folder. Starting at the bottom, I have two options here. I've got a gradient option, which is what I personally like and prefer for your background color. Turn both off. So the gradient basically is going to allow you to transition from one color to another, or the same color, just darker at the bottom to a lighter shade at the top. I like the way that looks a little better. For those of you who don't like to bother with gradients, I do have a solid color option, so just turn off the one you don't want to use and turn on the one that you do. Choosing your solid color is very simple. Just clicking on this little box here, you get your color picker and just find the color that you want. Gradient, I won't do a full tutorial. There's plenty on YouTube. If you're not familiar with gradients, just go on there and find one that's been made in the last, say, year or so, and you can brush up on that. But basically just pick your darker color at the bottom. Over here you pick your lighter color at the top, and you can use a gradient. It looks a little better in my opinion. Let's back out of that. Next we have a lower background shape, change color. So if I turn that off, you can see that it is this white section that comes through here, and you can see that just turning this one layer off you lose the red and the white. So basically those are stroke outlines that have been added, layer styles that have been added. There's also an inner shadow, and the color is a gradient. It's very subtle. It might just look white, but it's a little bit darker shade of white to pure white. And you can do the same if you're changing the color. You can go with a gradient that you already have, or you can customize one yourself. If you prefer to just have a solid color, turn that off, turn on this color overlay, and you just pick one color right here. Very simple. So we'll back out of that. Let's go back to the gradient. Your inner shadow, if you see, if I turn that off, right in here, you get a little bit of a dimension from that. You can always adjust how dark it is, or the opacity, the distance, the size. Shouldn't have to really do much there. And then we have an upper light cast. So if you look up here at the top, it's kind of lighter. Turn it off, you can see it just darkens up the top a little bit. So just give the appearance of a light source maybe above. Opacity is at 50%, so you can increase or decrease it. Blend mode is set to soft light, or you can turn it off completely if you want to. And that's it for the background layers. Next we have our repeating text in the background. It says change stroke color. So a little bit to explain here. You have options. I'm going to zoom in so we can see a little bit better. Right now I have the fill at 0, so you only see the background color, and there's a stroke turned on. So if I turn off the stroke, you don't see anything. So if you like that look, you can leave it as it is. If you want a solid color, you can turn the fill to 100%, or at any percent that you want. You obviously don't want it too bold. You want it very, very subtle. So if you just want a little bit, you can turn off the stroke. You can get a look there. I'll show you how to change the color completely if you want to. But if you want to leave it the way it is, leave it at 0. Come to the stroke outline here. And what I've done is I've selected a color that's lighter than the background color, but it is still the same color. It's just lighter, so it does show up. You can see it, but it's not. Try to find something not too distracting. So if you see what, like to me, if I get too bright, it looks too distracting. I don't like that. So just keep that in mind. Same thing if you go with the solid color. We'll back out of that. Another option you have, you can turn the stroke off, or you can leave it on, and you can add the drop shadow. It just gives some three-dimensional look to it. It's an option. Of course, you can always adjust the drop shadow opacity, distance, size if you want to. Just another option. So let's talk about changing what it says and also the color. So this folder here has all of the repeating text layers. They're in red because you don't need to do anything with them. I labeled this one green. They're all smart objects, and so if you've used templates that are set up this way previously, you'll already be familiar with it. But it's a smart object. If you just double click this little icon here, it's going to open up in a separate window. So here is where you can change the color if you want to anything that you want. But if you double click, and we can type in whatever we want. So we'll change it to Go Bulldogs. And we'll put an exclamation mark and do a space. So we've got what we wanted to say. Rather than continuing to type it and risk typos, I'm just going to highlight all of it. Control or Command C to copy it. And I'm going to hit my right arrow key so that my cursor goes to the end. I'm going to hit Control or Command V to just paste enough where it just covers the entire space. Once you've got it done, you're good. Just hit this check mark and we'll X out of this smart object. Make sure you hit save or it will not change your text. Once you hit save, it'll take a second, but it'll take you back, and now all of your text has been updated to say Go Bulldogs. Simple as that. Save you a lot of time doing it that way. So we'll go back to Go Mavs. That's it for the repeating background text folder. Next we have a folder where I just put more text layers. Text is broken up into like 3 different sections, but if we turn this off, you can see you've got the primary text over here on the left, and then we've got some of these subtext layers over here on the right. I guess let's get where you can see it all. So we'll turn it off. It does not contain the lower text for the name, which I'll get to that here in a minute. Let's open it up. So here we have a diagonal subtext. I don't know, it can be used for anything or it can be turned off. Very simple. You can change the color here or up here. Solid color. You can change it to say varsity, junior varsity, anything that you want. Next we have this vertical subtext. So you'll see that I have 2024 Memorial Cheer here. So let's talk about that. If you're not familiar with how to have 2 different colors, basically if you double click in this box here to highlight everything, it will automatically take you to your text tool. So with your cursor, you just want to click, drag to highlight the portion that you want to change. So you can change it if it's a different year. If it's 2025, you can change that, but you can also change the color by only selecting the portion that you want to change the color to. And so once you've done that, click, drag to highlight the other portion that you want to change. You can type in whatever it is that you want it to say, and of course you can change the color the same way. You could use this for the subject's name, and if that is the case and you're using automation, you might need to keep it all one color. But otherwise you should only be doing this once, so not a big deal to do the split color. I think that looks a lot better that way. Let's say that you have something that doesn't really fit in this space. So let's type in Bulldog football, because this is something that you might run into. Or let's go with something even longer, Maverick football. Okay, so it runs off above this background frame. To me, that doesn't look good. So you have a couple of options. One is that you can click, and I have to hold down Shift to maintain proportions, and drag this corner down until it fits. It'll make it smaller, so if you have to make it too small, you might not like the way that looks. And so if that is the case, we would consider coming back down to the background folder here. If we open that up and come to this layer here, lower background shape, you have a little bit of wiggle room that you can work with. So if I click on that anchor point, you'll see the actual shape itself. Now you can click on this middle anchor point and you can bring this down. I think if you get down all the way to this bottom left corner here, it starts to not look right, but you can add a little bit of space if you want to shrink that down to make more space for this vertical text. Completely up to you. If you do that, obviously you would need to move this subtext down, and then also you would need to select the repeating text and bring it down far enough or scale it up to fill the space to make sure that it doesn't have a blank section down there. Not too much, but that's something when I was making sample images that I ran into, and so I wanted to make sure that I explain how to fix that. Let's see, so we've covered diagonal text, we've got our vertical subtext. Now I have a subfolder for the vertical team name, and I have options on here. I'm having a hard time finding fonts that I really like that are free for commercial use. I've been using some that you got to pay a little bit for a commercial license, and so I did use a font that does cost for a commercial license because I really like the font. I've got it in this, what is it, the seafoam teal color here. This font is called Buenton? I don't know, I'm butchering that, I'm sure. It's $22. So to me, it's worth it. It's got all these standard characters that you see here, but then it has all of these stylistic alternates with tails. And it also has these tails that you can add on, these ligatures and swashes. It just offers a lot of variety, and I just love the way the font looks, especially on this template. Currently, it's, what did I say? It's $22. Yes, $22. And you can use this on any other template or design that you want. In my opinion, well worth it. With that being said, I do know that not everyone is going to want to spend an additional $22 to use this font. So I have another font called Streetwear, which is very similar. It doesn't look quite as good in my opinion, but it's still a great font that I've used in several other templates of mine. So if you do not want to pay for a commercial license, you can opt for the green option here, which is Streetwear. It just doesn't have all of the extra stylistic swashes and characters and all of that good stuff. So up to you completely, but I wanted to make sure that I give you a free for commercial use option. Basically the way this is set up, there's not a gradient, so you just pick the color that you want up here in your character panel or up here. It does have 2 stroke outlines. So when I was creating my sample images, I found that some color schemes looked better with only 1 stroke outline. So if we were to turn off, you can barely see the white. Sometimes that looked better, and then sometimes it also looked better if I reduced the size of this outer one and made it not as thick. So you can play around with it. You can make it smaller or bigger. Same thing with the inner stroke. Of course, change the colors with this little box here on both of them. You can turn them both off. There is an inner shadow, so just like any inner shadow or drop shadow, if you want it to be more prominent or less prominent, you can play around with this opacity, distance, and size. But I try to set it where it's subtle, it's not too distracting, but it just creates a little dimension. And that's pretty much it. So we've covered the more text layers. Let's look at rectangle subject frame layers. So it's always interesting trying to come up with names for these folders, but we're referring to this rectangular shape that's back here. This let me go ahead and turn off the subject so you can see it. I tried to create like a glossy highlight appearance. So if you turn that off, you can see it's just solid. I've got this on. I've got it set to white and normal blend mode with the opacity only at 20%. So if you want it more prominent, you can increase the opacity, or you can decrease the opacity if you want to fine tune it. It might look different. You know, this is on red, so if you change the color, you might want to mess with that. It's up to you. You would probably want to leave it white or turn it off altogether. So just like the side text, there's two options for this text layer that you put inside this rectangular section so that they can match. So if you opt to use the $22 bouillon ton, then you would want to use the coinciding text or font option here. So if you go with streetwear, you can go with this. So basically what you want to do is just change the letter, you know, if it's the first letter of the town, or if it's the first letter of their mascot, whatever it may be, and then you can scale it up or down and position it how you want. You can rotate it, scale it up, just make it fit. Now, your subject's going to be over it, so it may not be completely obvious, you know, what it is. So once you start putting subjects in there, you might decide that you want to adjust it or change it to make it bigger or smaller. But that's up to you. It does have a stroke outline. Currently it's set to white. It also has the fill at 0, so you're just going to see the color that's behind it. If you want it to be a different color, we'll bring the fill up, and it's set to a very similar color, a darker shade, but you could change it to blue. Probably not that blue, maybe that blue. You can make it solid. It'll be a little more potentially distracting, but sometimes it looks good. Some of my sample images, I did a contrasting color, or you can leave the fill at 0 so you just see what's behind it. It has an additional stroke layer that I have turned off. You can turn it on, so if you want 2 different colors for the stroke outline, of course you can adjust the size as well if you want it larger or smaller. You just find what looks good to you. So you have options: both strokes, 1 stroke, no stroke, solid color, or complete transparency with the fill turned all the way down. And then of course you just pick which one you want to use. Down here we have the rectangular subject frame. There's a drop shadow on the folder, which is very subtle. You can see down here. You can adjust that if you want to. Inside the folder I have a shape layer, and the color is controlled with a gradient. So again, just double click the word gradient overlay, click on the gradient box here, and then you can pick your 2 colors or select from a gradient you already have. And that is pretty much it. You can change the size of this if you want to. So click on an anchor point here, and you can make it taller, shorter. You can make it wider if you feel the need to. All right, keeping it moving. So next we have don't show, that's hard to say, don't show subject's feet option. So if you turn this on, if you're going to hide feet. We also have an option if you want to show the subject's feet. So if I turn that off and turn this on, you can see it's a little different. I have the text set up a little bit different. But let's go back to not showing feet and take a look here. Inside here is where I have the text layers for the name. Normally I don't include them in the subject folder, but because they coincide with the 2 options, I decided to do that. If you open it up, it's pretty simple. We have diagonal subtext, which is turned off. So if you want varsity down here or something down here, you can do that. Change the color to anything that you want. By default, it's turned off. We've got our first name, which I probably need to make that say full name. Yeah, need to update that. So again, here I have two different colors. That's not automation friendly. Apologize for that. So you may have to go with a single color. But this is where you would have your subject's name, and you would change the colors the same way. You can make it all one, or you can select the first name, change the color, select the last name, change the color. And then we have our subtext, which is basically your classification: senior, junior, sophomore, freshman. You can just go with the one that you need for the subject that you have in there. And next we have our lower shape. A little typo there. You can figure it out though. Lower shape behind the name text. So if I turn that off, you can see that that goes away. It's set to white, so you can barely see it there, but it's this shape. If I click here, you can see the outline of it, and it has some things on here that are not turned on. If you want to add this stroke or different stroke options, it has an inner shadow that you can adjust or turn off. Has a solid color overlay if you just want to do a single color. This is set to a gradient, so you have that option. It also has a drop shadow. So I wasn't sure if I should add all of these options in there. I like the way it looks with the inner shadow and a gradient, but there may be some scenarios where you want to use these other options or features. And then of course you can move it or scale it if you find a reason to do that. Next we have the subfolder where you would it's actually two subfolders where you would insert your subjects. So sometimes I have to do a subfolder because I want to apply two different masks. So you'll see here I have this bottom corner masked out. Without that mask, if their leg were to come out in this direction, then you might see it, which we don't want. Up here on the primary folder, I have a gradient mask, which is what creates this fade look that you see here. Fade into white. It almost looks like, you know, she's standing in some hazy fog or something. So that's why I have those two folders. So just insert your subjects into this subfolder here. It says insert subjects here. Pretty self-explanatory. There is a drop shadow. If I turn it off, you can see behind the subject. So you can adjust that if you want it lighter, darker, or more prominent. There is a color grade option that is turned on by default. If you turn it off, you can see it's very subtle, and that's because it's only at 5%. If I increase it, you can see our skin tone gets, you know, much redder. So you don't want to get too carried away, but to me, I thought it looked better if I added just a little bit of red. Helps tie in with the background. With this, you can play with the opacity, and of course you can adjust the colors. Typically you wouldn't do anything, you know, purple or green, but maybe more red, yellow for warm, or red, orange for warm, probably not yellow. And then occasionally you might want to make it cooler, and so you might pick a blue color. You can play around with it and see if you get something that you like, and if you decide you don't like the way that it looks, you can just turn it off. Just an option that's in there for you. And that is it for the not showing feet option. We'll turn that off and take a look at the showing feet option. So here we have name and class text layers in this subfolder. You can see first name, last name, classifications. They're all independent, so you can set the color that you want for each one. Now, depending on the pose that you have, you might have to select the primary folder with your move tool. You may have to move it around and position it wherever it fits. So this is probably a little more hands-on. Obviously, if you're showing feet, it's more hands-on because there are either reflections and or drop shadows involved. But here we have our folder where you would insert your subjects, and I decided to leave some of my shadow layers in here just so you can see them. They're not necessarily intended to be reused, so you would want to replace it. I would say this very soft, subtle, round ground shadow, if I turn it off, you can see it's very subtle. That can be reused if you If you want to, you just position it and scale it. You can stretch it wide. You can make it any size you want or need. You can duplicate it and have one for each subject that you insert in here, depending on how hands-on you would like to be. But you can see I have 2 ground shadows or contact shadows here that I left in here. This is our sample subject, so you can see if I turn her off what it looks like. But basically you would insert your subjects into this folder, and you would need to create your own contact and very soft, subtle ground shadow. You don't have to make it super realistic. I don't think this one's super realistic. It's just enough to sell it. Same thing with the color grade option. And that is it. You have those options, show feet or not. So that's everything with this vertical file. There's a few things to talk about with the horizontal file, so let's jump over to that real quick. Okay, so now we have our 3x2 horizontal file. So the background layers, if we look at them, it's pretty much all the same things. This is now a V instead of just a diagonal rectangular shape. This V can be adjusted, so if you click on an anchor point, I hold down Shift to maintain the proportions. You can bring it down for something that looks more like this, or if you just want it bigger, you can move it up. You can also make it smaller. You can just adjust it to how you want it to look for how you arrange your subjects in this particular design. So that's something that's a little bit different. Repeating text is the same. We have our upper subtext that's different but set up the same way as the other files. We have our horizontal stripe. So basically this is, let me turn off our subjects here. What is it? This one? Okay, and so if we look at this, this is basically similar to the rectangular shape on the individual. I just have a shape that stretches across. So just like the individual, you can make this taller, more narrow if you want the edges to show any type of look that you want. You can do that. You change the color with the gradient the same way, and it has the 2 font options. And so you can see what I've done here is I have a gradient on the background or the shape, and then it's very subtle. I go with a different shade so you can barely see it, but this says memorial. It also has subjects over it, so you're not really able to see exactly what it says, but it's just a little extra touch. So if I cover it up, it's just a little extra detail that's in there. It's up to you on what color you make this text, but I really think it needs to be super subtle, not a lot of contrast, or it typically will get too distracting. We have our subject images upper row. You may not want an upper row, so if not, you can turn that off. And if you do turn that off, then you can scale and move this text layer up or down, make it however, place it however you need to, depending on how you're setting these up. But there is a layer mask on here that prevents the subjects from showing. Let's see if I turn off this, you can kind of see. So we have a couple layer masks. So we have a subfolder with a gradient mask. That's where we get this fade. But over here, I didn't want their legs to extend beyond this V. So that's why I have this mask here. So I don't want to get too intricate or detailed or confuse anybody, but I feel like this is going to come up. If you change this V shape, let's say you bring it up, okay, now you can see what I was talking about. You're not going to want that. So if you do change it, you can come up to this, click on this little chain link, make sure you have your move tool, and you can either use the arrow key, which depending on how far you have to go might work just fine, or you can actually click on an anchor point, hold down Shift, and pull it up. But I'm going to finesse it. You just need to adjust your mask to fit the new V shape. So if that comes up, that's how you would handle that situation. So let's back up here. What else? Same color grade options. Okay, on the bottom here, we have if you open up subject to image bottom row, I have show feet option turned on. So if you're going to use that, you would put your subjects in this folder. If you're not going to show feet, turn that off and turn on this one here that says don't show feet. This has a gradient mask on it, and it's still protected by this other layer mask here so that it doesn't extend below this red here. But you would put your subjects in here and arrange them accordingly. And then there is a lower subtext that is turned off by default, but you may want that on there. You can have it say anything that you want. I think that's it. I think that just leaves the memory mate, which we'll touch on real quick, and then we'll wrap it up. I have the memory mate right here. So really, if you've ever used any of my memory mates before, you're already going to be familiar with this. But basically, the main thing to know is that in order to create your memory mate, you want to start with the 5x4 horizontal file, and you want to create your team image. So you'll see this is the team image. Once you have that saved as a JPEG, you can open up the memory mate and basically customize it the same way. But right here, the second red folder, it says insert 5x4 team image here. So if we open that up, we have our sample team image. So let's open that up. It's a smart object. So let's pretend this is a different team image, and we can just drag and we can drop it in here. So now, if you do that from your folder, it'll probably make it a smart object. If it's not a smart object, if it doesn't have this little icon here, you can right click and then find convert to smart object. And so as long as your team image is in this folder, all you have to do is scale it and position it how you want it. Whether you want it on this side or this side, that is up to you. But that is really all there is to the memory mate. Under the subject image folder, you still have the same options to show feet, to not show feet. So just use the respective subfolder for whichever option you want. Okay, so I think that really is it. Hopefully I have covered everything. And as always, if there's something I didn't cover, if you still have questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Email address is don@thirdcreative.com. But it is fall and it's a busy season. I hope this design helps you guys out. It's time for me to get busy working on the next one. So until next time, thanks for watching. We'll see you later.